بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وخليله وصفيه وأمينه على وحيه ومصطفاه من خلقه اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد أما بعد. My dear brothers and sisters, for the sake of al-Islam, and also for the sake of the sunnah, and the sunnah is Islam and Islam is the sunnah, I ask Allah Azza wa Jal, or after greeting you with the salutations, I ask Allah to greet you all. Hayyakum Allah. Last week, we discussed a few things. Before we continue with tonight's lesson, if we could try to follow our sunnah of making a revision or review of what we spoke about last week. For indeed, many of the great scholars of Hadith of the past, from among the time of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum to their disciples and their pupils, the Tabi'un or the Tabi'iyun, to the times of the 1st and 2nd and 3rd century, they all came to consensus that reviewing knowledge is one of the most beneficial and easy ways of keeping that knowledge. Possessing the ilm that you previously took, to make it firmer, to make it deeper, and also keeping that knowledge alive and to spread it and to pass it on to others. As one of the tabi'in says, مُذَاكِرَةُ الْعِلْمِ حَيَاتُهُ. He says making revision of knowledge is giving life to knowledge. It's giving breath to ilm by reviewing it. As for a class, lecture, workshop, conference, telelink, and then that's it, marry, go, blah, 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 you live your happy life. That's giving death to knowledge. Okay? You're not going to remember nothing. And the person, the speaker, or the teacher, often has to reinvent the wheel again. Has to teach the same thing that he taught a year ago, or 2 years ago, or 5 years ago. And that's unfair to the teacher, and that's also a waste of time. So when we talk about following the pious predecessors, the manhaj, the salaf, as we said before, we'll say again, is not restricted to one aspect. It's not just pertaining to one thing. Rather, that's also from the way of the salaf al-salih. Reviewing knowledge is giving life to knowledge. And as Abdullah ibn Abbas has said, studying knowledge, reviewing knowledge at nighttime is better than standing in prayer. It's better than standing in prayer. Yani, voluntary prayer. It's better to review something that you learned at nighttime than to pray all night. That's what Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma said. And there are many statements. Whenever you read the books of Adab Talab al-Ilm, the etiquettes of seeking knowledge, whether it's the book of al-Khatib al-Baghdadi or the book of Ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah, which these two books are considered the staple books and the classical books, the mother books of all other books that were wrote later on about seeking knowledge. 9 out of 10 people, if not 10 out of 10, anyone who wrote a book about seeking ilm, its virtue, how to seek knowledge, when to seek knowledge, the do's and don'ts of seeking knowledge, whether he quotes the chains of narrations and the statements of the pious predecessors, or whether he just wrote it as a normal book, then they are all taken from that table spread of these two great scholars. The first is al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, Abu Bakr, Ahmad ibn Ali ibn Thabit, formerly known as al-Khatib al-Baghdadi. And the second is the Hafiz Abu Yusuf ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah, or Abu Umar Yusuf ibn Abdul Barr, al-Qurtubi al-Namri, who was from Portugal or Spain. And Khatib al-Baghdadi was from Iraq. And both of these great scholars, they died in the same year. And that's the year in which they said that the Hafiz of the East and the Hafiz of the West died. Khatib al-Baghdadi was from Iraq, which is relatively east. Ibn Abdul Barr was from Islamic Spain and Portugal, which is relatively west. During those times, that was the well-known West. And they both died in the year 463 of the Hijrah. 463. As for Ibn Abdul Barr, rahimahullah, then this book is famous. called Jami'u Bayan al-Ilmi wa Fadlihi, comprehensive collection of narrations, hadith, statements of the pious predecessors regarding knowledge. What is knowledge? The reality of knowledge and its virtues and excellences. As for Khatib al-Baghdadi rahimahullah, then he wrote many more books. He wrote the famous book called Al-Jami' al-Akhlaq al-Rawi wa Adab al-Sami', a book talking about the etiquettes of students of hadith, what they should do, what they shouldn't do. Okay, he wrote another book called Al-Faqih wal-Mutafaqih, the one who has fiqh and the one who's seeking fiqh. He wrote another book called Sharaf al-Ashab al-Hadith, the nobility of the people of hadith. He wrote another book called Nasihati li Ahli al-Hadith, my advice to the people of hadith, and the list goes on. And the point we're trying to get to in all of those books that they wrote, there's many chapters in which they talked about reviewing knowledge, going over what you previously took in every single book. Let alone the scholars who came later on, such as Badr ad-Din ibn Jama'ah, rahimahullah, from the 7th century. He wrote a book called تذكرة السامع والمتكلم في آداب أحسنت تذكرة السامع والمتكلم, a reminder for the listener and the speaker with regards to the etiquettes of the learned and the learner. His book is also considered to be classical, even though he died approximately around 300 years after them, but it's still a classical staple book. And then all the other books came later on were taken from those 3 books. Those are the Ummahat, the mother books. In those books, they all talk about what? Muraja'ah wa mudhakarat al-ilm, reviewing knowledge. Ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah, his book is one of the most beautiful books you'll come across. Ibn Abdul Barr rahimahullah is one of the greatest scholars of al-Islam. Okay? And Ibn Abdul Barr was a mujtahid. He was not a blind follower. He was an independent jurist. And to the Maliki madhab, Ibn Abdul Barr is like Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah to the Hanbali madhab. We all know the service and the paramount work that Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah did for Islam as a whole, let alone the Hanbali madhab, and verifying the statements of Imam Ahmad. What did he actually say, and the proofs and the evidences and the discussions and the debates. That's what Ibn Abdul Barr did for Imam Malik. And his explanation of the Muwatta is in 37 volumes. You understand what this means? The Muwatta of Imam Malik bin Anas, whatever print that you have is not going to be no bigger than 2 volumes. But Kathir, it could be in 1 volume. Ibn Abdul Barr explains it in 37 books. It's one of the most extensive, expansive explanations you'll find of any hadith book, period. Fath al-Bari, this book and that book, that's Mukhtasar. Fath al-Bari is a summarized book. Ibn Abdul Barr, 37 volumes explaining the Muwatta of Imam Malik. And he has another explanation called al-Istidhkar, which is a separate, different explanation of Muwatta of Malik. So Ibn Abdul Barr, the point I'm trying to get to is, he was a great, great scholar of Islam. And in his book, he talks about many things. He talks about reviewing knowledge, intentions, traveling, differences of opinion, etiquettes of debating, so on and so forth. And he also, one of the best, excellent benefits of the book of Ibn Abdul Barr is that he narrated ijma'. There's consensus of the people of knowledge that the blind follower is not from the people of knowledge. Al-ijma' ala anna al-muqallid laysa min ahli al-ilm. The one who is a sheep, who goes left, goes right, is not considered to be from the people of knowledge. So if that is the case, if the blind follower is not to be from the people of knowledge, then blind following also is not knowledge. Taqleed is not ilm. Okay? And Allah clearly says in the Quran, وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ. Allah says, do not approach, don't go near that which you have no ilm of. That's what Allah says in the Quran. So if taqleed is not ilm, and Allah says don't go near that which you don't have ilm, how can I force Abu Tawheed into a position, or force my view or my opinion, and I don't have the ilm myself? It's haram, without a doubt. And it is not mandatory, not recommended to take. You accept something, you take something, this sheikh says this brother says that, alhamdulillah, that's fine, that's for your deen. But don't force it on others, and impose it on others. Because Ibn Abdul Barr, not from the 6th century or the 7th or the 8th, early on, he made an ijma' of all of the salaf and all of the khalaf that the blind follower is not from the people of knowledge. So we have to be careful. Ikhwan. We don't want to go on too deep because that's not the topic of our lecture. This is just like an introduction or a preface. And it came out by accident. I really didn't want to talk about that, but it's very important. Part of it to understand from day one to review knowledge. And from the ways of avoiding blind following and being free from its noose, because it's a noose. Once it's around your neck, you're like a kettle. From the ways of avoiding blind following is going what? Reviewing knowledge. We studied this. We went over this 3 times. I haven't understood. Boom, 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 boom. You can't tell me anything different. I'm sorry. I have the proof, I have the evidence, the statements, khalas. And then you grow and you're in. Okay, so what did we talk about last week? In general. Not the details, but right now, what was the topic of our class last week? Follow Shamil. Child custody. Ahsant. What's it called? Al-hidaanah. Everyone say al-hidaanah. Al-hidaanah. Not dana, al-hidaanah. Al-hidaanah. Which means child custody or child maintenance. Ahsant. What else did we speak about last week? That's the general topic. What's some of the details we talked about? Anything. Follow Shamil. That it is a sub-branch of divorce. That it follows the rulings of divorce. And we also mentioned there are different types of divorce in Islam. Who can name one of those types? The general term without no details. Hold that with me. Al-khula. Ahsant. We also mentioned talaq. Naam. We also mentioned, that's 2. We mentioned what? Another type. Al-dhihab. Al-dhihab. When a man says, Anti alayka dhahri ummi. He says, you're to me like my mother's back. You are to me like my mother's back. That is a type of divorce, or that is included in the chapter of divorce. That's 3. There's another we mentioned. Al-ilah. When a man says, Wallahi, I'm not having intercourse with you. He says to his wife, he swears not to be intimate with her. And we mentioned the rulings of that. He has 4 months. So if he does not have intercourse with her, at the end of the 4 months, either he will divorce or the marriage will be split up. Many of us were looking like, this is very unfortunate. That these terms are foreign and exotic to us. Very unfortunate. You don't have to be a scholar of fiqh and this and that, but every Muslim, you should have heard of the term at least once. Because it's in the Quran. It's in the Quran. Okay? Even if you have a general basic grasp of it, you should at least have what, Mahdi? At least heard of it, at least once. Right? Good. What else did we mention last week? Briefly. Tafadhal.
You also mentioned that Allah, when He swears by something, it's usually something that's great, like when He swears by al-duha.
Nah, ahsant. Right, what else? Quickly before we go on. What else did we talk about?
A woman gets a child, they're split with the husband and the wife, except if the husband, if the wife says no.
That the woman has most precedence to the young child. The woman has the most precedence to the young child, as long as she doesn't remarry. Fine. What else did we talk about briefly before we move on? Follow.
The linguistic meaning of hidaanah.
The linguistic meaning of the term hidaanah, which means what?
There's like 3 things. It's like this area.
Your side, the side of your body, in the Arabic language.
Yeah.
Tayyib. Number 2,
to hug someone.
to embrace someone, to give someone a hug. And number 3,
And it's when the chicken goes
incubation or a hen sitting over its eggs. Tayyib. What is that? Why is that important? Big deal. What does that have to do with our deen, Islam? That's the Arab language. What does that have to do with what is that? What's the benefit of that? We explained this. Abu Tawheed.
In the Sharia, it means to protect somebody who can't.
To look out for someone who's too young or too weak or mentally ill that can't. And that goes back to the linguistic meaning. The hen sits over the egg until the chick can hatch out. Once it hatches, kalas. Fends for itself. And even then it still looks after the little small chicks. But the point is that you raise, cultivate, nurture, keep safe. The hen has to keep the fox away from the egg. وهكذا. Sahih? Also hugging someone. And that is much more than just paying the bills for your children. It's much more than just telling them no. It's also showing them love and affection. Being there for them. Shoulder to lean on. Give me a hug, son. Or stepson, or daughter, or stepdaughter. وهكذا. Nephew. What else did we mention? What else did we talk about? Anything else? What else did we talk about? What did we talk about last week? Zaid? Anybody? What did we talk about? A woman's voice that is not an aura. Nah, good. What else? We explained that a woman's voice is not an aura. According to the strongest opinion, it's not an aura. And it doesn't mean that a woman should just be talking and raising a voice to anybody. But the one who says that a woman's voice is awrah, he has to bring his clear dalil. Father, what else do we speak about?
You mentioned that for a child in general, a woman, her smell, her warmth, and her bed are better for the child than the men in general.
The statement of Abdullah ibn Abbas, proving that was the understanding of the companions, or at least some of them, that a mother is nothing like the mother's warmth and comfort for that small child. No matter what the father has or what he can do, it's better for the child when he's young. So what else do we talk about?
The woman who came to
A hadith narrated about what companion?
Abdullah ibn Umar.
Abdullah ibn Amr. Ahsant. Jameel. Good. What was that hadith? What did the hadith say? Come on, this is supposed to be quick. This is a quick exercise. This is warm up. This is warm up. It's not our main. This is just an exercise. Run some laps. Jumping jacks. Stretch your arms. Really. That's all it is. Yalla. Paraphrase it. It's okay.
Yeah, only a part of it. It says that a woman wants.
If you can't mention the whole thing, then close your tablet. Give it to me from your mind. Nah. It's fair, right is right.
I only have part of it.
Alright, from your memory.
Okay, basically a woman came to the Prophet complaining, and she stated that, this child was once like in my belly, this child was once like a refuge, etc., and now this child is, and now my husband divorced me, and now,
He wants to snatch and take the child from him.
away, and then that's when the Prophet said, "Oh no, you have more right to the child unless you born it."
Ahsan, good. Where can we find this hadith? I want to reference the hadith. Where can we find it in Najm?
Ibn Majah,
Ibn Majah,
Ahmed,
Musnad Imam Ahmed,
Dawud.
Sunan Abi Dawud. Is Musnad Ahmed in English?
Huh? They have some, but it's only like in 40,000 hadith.
How many hadiths are there in there? Only 40,000?
No, I'm saying that's translated. I think.
How many? Is that insufficient number?
Huh?
That's a lot of it.
You memorize like a million.
No, in the Musnad though. What's in his book?
And
Is it the whole thing?
Is that all right?
Right, moving on. Anything else before we go on with tonight's lesson? Anything else that we mentioned? That's all we talked about last week? A long time. Right. What about the conditions of hadithanah? The ruling of it, that it's obligatory or recommended. We spoke about recommended. SubhanAllah.
Obligatory.
Wajib, la shak, without a doubt, obligatory, mandatory. Right. Moving on. The next hadith that the author, Hafidh ibn Hajar, rahimahullah, mentions, he says, وَعَنْ أَبِي هُرَيْرَةَ رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُ أَنَّ امْرَأَةً قَالَتْ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ أَنَّ زَوْجِي يُرِيدُ أَنْ يَذْهَبَ بِابْنِي وَقَدْ نَفَعَنِي وَسَقَانِي مِنْ بِئْرِ أَبِي عِنِبَةٍ فجاء زوجها فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يا غلام هذا أبوك وهذه أمك فخذ بيد أيهما شئت فأخذ بيد أمه فانطلقت به رواه أحمد والأربعة وصححه الترمذي. Hadith says, narrated Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, that a woman said, O Messenger of Allah, my husband wants to take my son from me, and aforetime he has benefited me and given me water from the well of Abi Inabah. Shortly afterwards, her husband came. The Prophet ﷺ said, O young boy, O young man, this is your father and this is your mother. Take the hand of any of the two you please. Take the hand of any of the two that you please. The boy then grabbed his mother's hand and went away with his mother. Tayyib. Khair, inshallah. This hadith here is collected by Imam Ahmed and the four people of Sunan, and at-Tirmidhi rahimahullah declared it to be authentic. At-Tirmidhi declared it to be authentic. Once again, it says, وعن أبي هريرة أن امرأة قالت يا رسول الله إن زوجي يريد أن يذهب بابني وقد نفعني وسقاني من بئر أبي عنبة فجاء زوجها فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يا غلام هذا أبوك وهذه أمك فخذ بيد أيهما شئت فأخذ بيد أمه فانطلقت به رواه أحمد والأربعة وصححه الترمذي. طيب, hadith states, narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, a woman said, O Messenger of Allah, my husband wishes to take my son from me, and he has benefited me and given me drink from the well of Abu Inaba. Shortly afterwards, her husband came. The Prophet ﷺ then said to the young man, this is your father, this is your mother. Choose which one you want to go with. The boy chose his mother and she took him away. Khayr, inshallah. As-San'ani, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, وَالْحَدِيثُ دَلِيلٌ على أن الصبي بعد استغنائه بنفسه يخير بين الأم والأب. Before we read this kalam, please someone tell me the main purpose of this hadith. Not the details, not what you understand. What is the main moral from this hadith? As I've taught you brothers in the past, short, concise speech. The permissibility of this, the permissibility of that, the recommendation of this, this praise of that, like that. Give me what I gave you. Sahih taught it years ago, right? Fadal al-Tawheed.
The child can choose.
No, it's not right. No, la. It has to start off with a ruling. It has to start off with what? In this hadith is the impermissibility of drinking standing up. And don't say one shouldn't drink standing up. What is the ruling on drinking standing up? It's difference of opinion. Some scholars say it's haram, some scholars say it's disliked. But this hadith specifically proves that's when we talk about al-istinbat, deducement. Starts off with a what? A ruling. Then later on we take the different etiquettes and the benefits. But the main thing we're studying here is what? Are we studying etiquettes here? Tafsir, Aqidah? What's our main goal right now? It's to study what? Fiqh. To study what? Fiqh. Fiqh. So that's how we have to start our kalam. Right? And this hadith is what, Najm?
Permissibility of a child choosing.
The permissibility of giving a child an option. Good. Anyone else can give a shot at it, another try. And this hadith is the impermissibility, and the hadith is the recommendation in somebody else. We all understand that point? Play it, yalla. Until he give it another shot. And this hadith is the anybody?
Permissibility of a child, of a woman having a young child when she's not married.
Tight. The permissibility of a woman having a young man even though she's not married. She's divorced from her husband. Tight. Good. Sanani says this hadith is a proof that once the child reaches the age in which he can do without his mother's care, has the option of which parent he wants to go with. So we say in this hadith is, as Najm said, the legality. That this is the sharia. A child can choose, but not absolutely. Only when a child can do without the mother. Yani breastfeeding, pampers, kada. At that age, the child gets the option of what? Who do you want to live with? Everybody understand? And not necessarily the parent asking the child. Not necessarily the parent asking the child, but another person asking the child. Everybody understand this? This is the imam or the judge in a Muslim country. He's asking, nah, you want to stay with me, you want to go with your mother. There's a difference. It's a big difference. It's right or wrong. It's a big difference. Everybody understand the main point of the hadith? As-San'ani rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, وَاخْتَلَفَ الْعُلَمَاءُ فِي ذَلِكَ. Furthermore, scholars, they differ on this issue. فذهب جماعة قليلة إلى أنه يخير الصبي عملا بهذا الحديث وقول إسحاق بن راهوي وحد التخيير من 7 سنين. The first view, everybody write this down or memorize it if you're not going to write down. Opinion 1 is that the child is given the option to live which of the two parents he wants to live with at the age of 7. At the age of what? 7. At the age of what? 7. It's the first opinion. In other words, they're basing it off of this hadith. Okay? Opinion number 2. Or the first opinion was adopted by a few scholars, Sanani says. From the most notable of them was Imam Ishaq ibn Rahawayh. Imam Ishaq ibn Rahawayh. Who is Ishaq ibn Rahawayh? Anybody know? Fadl Shaykh. What century did he live in? What time period did he live in?
He was contemporary of
Fadl. He was a great friend of another big imam. Close friend. Ahmed bin Hanbal. It's a friend of who? Ahmed bin Hanbal. So that means he had to live in the 3rd century. If Imam Ahmed died in the middle of the 3rd century, 241. Right. Ishaq ibn Rahawayh was from what country?
Egypt.
Egypt. Anybody else? Ishaq ibn Rahawayh was Hanbali. He was Persian. He was Persian descent. Not of Arab descent. He was from Persia, Mesopotamia, parts of Iraq, modern day Iran, Hakada. This was his opinion. Opinion number 2. He says, وَذَهَبَتِ الْهَادَوِيَّةُ وَالْحَنَفِيَّةُ إِلَىٰ عَدْمِ التَّخْيِيرِ. The second opinion was adopted by some of the Hadawi scholars, which we're not going to explain right now, and some of the Hanafi scholars, is that there is no selection for the child. He doesn't get no option. The child does not have the option to choose which parent he wants to go to. Everybody understand? Before we get into the dalil, what's correct, what's incorrect, we understand the opinion first. They say no, there's no option for the child. طيب. وقالوا الأم أولى به إلى أن يستغني بنفسه فإذا استغنى بنفسه فالأب أولى بالذكر والأم أولى بالأنثى. Pay close attention now. The first group of scholars, what was their proof? What was the proof for their opinion? The hadith. That's simple. Clear. The second group of scholars, they have some details now. They say that the mother deserves the child the most until the child can fend for himself. When he reaches that age in which he can live and do some basic things by himself, then the boy deserves to go with the father and the girl deserves to go with the mother. They have more details in their opinion. They say it's not absolute. The first group says boy or girl. 7 years old, which one do you want to live with? The second group of scholars, they say no. They say what? Once they reach that age, boy should go with the father and the girl should go with the mother. ووافقه مالك في عدم التخيير لكنه قال إن الأم أحق بالولد ذكرا وأنثى قيل حتى يبلغ. As-Sanani then says, Imam Malik rahimahullah, he agreed with these scholars that what? The child does not have the option. But then he took a left turn. And he said that the mother deserves the child, period. Boy or girl. That the mother deserves the what? The child, boy or girl. The mother is divorced from the father. The mother did not remarry. Okay? The boy deserves to stay with the mother until he reaches the age of puberty and adolescence. See, that's what Imam Malik said. No option. Stay with your mother. The other group of scholars, they said, boy with father, girl with mother. Everybody understand this? We all got this? This clear? I can't, wallahi, ikhwan, I don't read faces. I need to hear now. Is this clear?
No.
Tayyib. Shyness is this praiseworthy when it comes to seeking knowledge. As Imam Mujahid rahimahullah ta'ala said, the student of Ibn Abbas, he says 2 people will never get knowledge. 2 people will never ever get ilm. Mustahin or mustakbir. There's one who's shy and one who's prideful. One who's too arrogant will never learn. And one who's too shy will never learn. And as it is narrated that Umar radiallahu anhu said, Qila, that he said, Man raqa wajhuhu raqa ilmuhu. The one whose face is too soft and timid, then his knowledge will be soft and timid. If you're too timid, too soft to speak up, then that's how your ilm is going to be. It's not going to be solid. This is very important etiquette that we try to mention all the time. That is not praiseworthy to be shy in class. But everybody understand?
Yes.
Yes.
Along with style.
Yes.
That is, I mean. طيب المهم لا بأس moving on. الصنعاني رحمه الله تعالى he then says وفي المسألة تفاصيل بلا دليل واستدل نفاة التخيير بعموم حديث أنت أولى به ما لم تنكحي قال ولو كان الاختيار إلى الصبي ما كانت أحق به. الصنعاني then says there are other details in this issue on which there is no direct proof for. Other details we don't have the time to get into right now. Some say this, we don't have time right now. Just deal with the basic things here. He says that the second group of scholars, the reason why they say the child is not to have the option is the previous hadith. What did the previous hadith state?
State that she has the choice, that Prophet gave a choice.
No, the hadith before that.
The one where it said the Prophet told the woman that you have right to the child if she doesn't remember.
هذا هو. You have the most right to your child as long as you don't remarry. And this goes to show what I was saying, that you don't make review. If you don't make review of knowledge, you can't move on. If you can't remember the first hadith and what it proved, then you're going to be stuck. You understand? You're going to be what? You're going to be stuck. The first hadith, he said, you deserve your child as long as you don't remarry. They say that hadith proves that there's no option, that the mother keeps the child no matter what. You got this? He then says, وأجيب بأنه كان عاما في الأزمنة أو مطلقا فيها فحديث التخيير يخصه ويقيده وهذا جمع حسن بين دليلين فإن لم يختر الصبي أحد أبويه فقيل يكون للأم بلا قرعة لأن الحضانة حق لها وإنما ينتقل عنها باختياره. He then says, the other group of scholars say no, that's wrong. That's because the hadith about the woman, you deserve your child as long as you don't remarry, is general. And this hadith is specific. They said that's a general vague hadith. As long as you don't remarry, you have your child. That's pertaining to when a child is what? Young, breastfeeding, walking around in pampers or diapers. Once the child reaches another age, then they say this hadith is specific. So they say that the strongest view is that the child gets the option when he reaches that age. Because it's what? Specific. Right, moving on. He then says, they also say that the mother deserves the child without drawing straws. Because child custody or child maintenance is a mother's right. And that right is never stripped from her unless the child himself or herself makes that option. So if the child does not have that option, then it remains as it is. The mother keeps the baby. In other words, some scholars say, which is this is a new issue we're taking, a new issue now. The child doesn't have the option, but they draw straws. Two different ways of determining who the child goes with, according to that opinion. First way is to ask the child, and the second way is to draw straws. Okay? Pull out a name out the hat. If it has this one, you go with that one. If you have that one, you go with this one. In Islam, we know that this is from the sunnah. And it's called al-istiham or al-qur'a. Al-istiham or al-qur'a. A hadith. Who can tell me a hadith in which the Prophet mentioned this? Pulling straws or rock, paper, scissors. Focus on that.
When he used to go on a journey and he used to decide which wife he used to take.
Nah, ahsant. When the Prophet ﷺ went on a journey, sit down, okay? Determining which wife would go on him on that trip, he would draw straws. Not to oppress anyone. You pick up a stick, you pick up a stick, you pick up a stick. Put it out. Whoever gets the longest or the shortest stick comes with me, and then the next one is the next turn. Everybody got this? Ahsant. It's an example from the sunnah. No one can say, that's haram, that's gambling, that's this, that's that. The Prophet ﷺ did it. Another example is what? Fadal.
I don't know if it's from the sunnah, but it's talking
Nah, only from Muhammad ﷺ. Nothing else.
Okay.
Not Imam Fulan or from the Salaf, Muhammad ﷺ. Drawing, pulling straws, you said in English, right? Rock, paper, scissors. Yani, determining a way to pick something. Al-istihamu wal-qur'a. طيب, the hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ mentioned about the call to the prayer. in the first row. If they knew the reward that lied in the adhan and sitting on the front row, ثُمَّ لَمْ يَجِدْهُ إِلَّا أَنْ يَسْتَهِمُوا عَلَيْهِ لَاسْتَهَمُوا عَلَيْهِ. He says if it was the only way they could get to the front row, or make the adhan, or be there for the adhan, it was crowded. The only way they could get there was to be drawing straws, they would do it. Who's going to get the last spot? Everybody understand? Who's going to get what? The last spot. So this is something that's from the sunnah. If there's 3 people left, how to decide without oppressing nobody, without no favoritism, then you say rock, paper, scissors. Or drawing straws. Al-Muhim, a way to figure it out. Everybody got this? Everybody understand this? Clear. Right, moving on. As-Sanani rahimahullah ta'ala, he then says, إنه يقرأ بينهم قد جاء القرعة أو حديث أبي هريرة برافة فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم استهما فقال الرجل من يحول بيني وبين ولدي فقال صلى الله عليه وسلم اختر أيهما شئت فاختارهما فذهبت لي. طيب, now let's move on. Let's move on now. Let's get off this issue. We won't get too confused. Alright, let's go to another issue. He then says إلا أنه قال في الهدي النبوي إن التخيير والقرعة لا يكون إلا إذا حصلت بالمصلحة الولد. Pay attention. A child does not get the option to live with one of his 2 parents, nor do we draw straws unless it's a clear benefit with one of the 2 parents. As for if this parent is totally corrupt, totally bad, not practicing Muslim, does not have enough finances to take care of the kid, irresponsible, then there's no option. Then there's what? There's no option. Everybody understand this? That option is only when both parents are similar, equal. This is a very important issue here. As we explained before, even with the mother. The mother deserves the child, but the mother's on drugs. Okay? So when you're a baby, the mother's on drugs. The child does not go with the mother. The mother has a boyfriend. The mother's not practicing. The mother doesn't have enough money to feed herself. We say that the baby has to go with? No. We didn't say that. We never said go with the father. Everything. We never said that. We never even discussed that issue. Some scholars say that the baby goes with the other relatives from the mother's side. The women. Grandmother, aunt, so on and so forth. Her female heirs. Her female what? Heirs. You would inherit from her from the mother's side. Then if nobody else is left, then it goes to the father. Everybody got this? To show you how things can become technical. Okay? And this goes to show you that you can't just take one opinion and just run away with it. Okay? And if somebody gives you a fatwa or tells you something and you act upon it, that's fine. Iyaka, thumma wa iyaka. Beware of forcing others. No, you have to do it like this. La. I heard in the class this. Imam Fulan in the masjid, he said this. I'm passing it on to you. This is the haqq. This is no other opinions. This is wrong. It's a bad idea. Kada. No. Beware. Because one fiqh mas'ala can go so deep. And if you don't know the ins and outs of that issue, you have spoken about Allah without knowledge. You have what? Spoken about Allah, which is the greatest sin in Islam. It's the greatest sin in Islam. Right, moving on. Ibn al-Qayyim, he says, a child does not get a selection, nor do they pour straws or draw straws, unless there is a maslahah of the child and one of these 2 people. Ibn al-Qayyim, he then says, فلو كانت الأم أصون من الأب وأغير منه قدمت عليه ولا التفات إلى قرعة ولا اختيار الصبي في هذه الحالة. He says, if the mother will protect the child better, if the mother has more concern and more jealousy over the child, then there's no consideration to the child's intention to go with the father, or the opposite. Okay? Why is this, somebody may ask? The hadith mentions this. Why? Why not? He says, فَإِنَّهُ ضَعِيفُ الْعَقْلِ يُؤْثِرُ الْبِطَالَةَ وَاللَّعْبَةَ. That is because the young child, in most cases, has a weak mind. The child has a what? A weak mind. And the child, in most cases, the child wants to run around and play. The child wants to have fun. Damn, he's 7 years old. I know every time I go to Abby's house, video games, movies, ice cream, popcorn. I go to Umi's house, sit down, clean up, together, pray. I'm going to Abby. What I got? Or the opposite. Ummi was away from me for all this time. It's not a reality, Tariq. It's real. It's a reality, okay? It's a reality. Okay? Especially when we're talking about opposite sexes. In most cases, the girl want to go with the father. Daddy's little girl. He's going to spoil her and take her out and buy her this and hold her hand and read, Mom, clean up, do this, blah, 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 blah. And the boy the opposite. Boys, in most cases, they want to go with their mother. The mother's going to spoil them. Daddy's going to hit them, punch them. Come on, pray, make salat, make wudu. What happened to that? So it has to go back to the religious benefit of the child. That's primary. Secondary is the worldly protection of the child. Who's the best breadwinner? Who has a safe, comfortable home? This person, he has people coming in and out of his home all the time. Friends, co-workers, this and that. It's not a good place for the child. He's going to be exposed to things that does not need to be exposed to. Everybody understand this? And it shows you the fiqh of the ulama. The fiqh of the ulama, how they look into things. And there's a difference between knowledge and between wisdom. Should we give him a quote or no? Give him a quote? As a person said, we'll say that for later. Moving on. He says, فإذا اختار من يساعد على ذلك فلن تفات إلى اختياره وكان عند من هو أنفع له وخير له ولا تحتمل الشريعة غير هذا. Ibn Qayyim, he then says, so therefore, when the child chooses the parent that will aid him and assist him upon playing around and being irresponsible, then there is no regard for his option or choice. And that is because the parent that is most wholesome, most beneficial for him or her, that's the only thing that the Sharia considers. And it's not about what you want, but it's about who will protect and take care of the child in the best manner. He then says, وَالنَّبِيُّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ قَالَ مُرُّوهُمْ بِالصَّلَاةِ لِسَبْعٍ وَاضْرِبُوهُمْ عَلَى تَرْكِهَا لِعَشْرٍ وَفَرِّقُوا بَيْنَهُمْ فِي الْمَضَاجِعِ. The Prophet ﷺ says, order your children to pray at the age of 7 and physically discipline them for not praying at the age of 10 and separate them in their beds. Wallahu ta'ala yaqul, Allah the Exalted says, قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ نَارًا. Save your families after you save yourselves from the fire. فَإِذَا كَانَتِ الْأُمُّ تَتْرُكُهُ فِي الْمَكْتَبِ أَوْ تُعَلِّمُهُ الْقُرْآنَ والصبي يؤثر اللعب ومعاشرة أقرانه وأبوه يمكنه من ذلك في أحق به ولا تخيير ولا قرعة وكذلك العكس انتهى وهو كلام حسن. Ibn al-Qayyim then says, therefore, if his mother puts him in the Islamic schools, if his mother teaches him the Quran, and the child does not want to study the Quran, they don't want to memorize, they don't want to learn Arabic, and the father will let him play with the other boys and do this and run around in the sandbox, he says, then the mother deserves the child. And it's regardless of what the child wants or what the father wants, remarriage, so on and so forth, he says there's baseless. And that's the end of the plan of Ibn Qayyim. As-San'ani says, he says, this is beautiful speech. It's beautiful speech. It goes to show you the respect and the regard that the scholars of Islam have for each other. Whereas they quote from each other and they benefit from each other. San'ani came later on. It says quoted from Ibn Qayyim. And it's the truth. Therefore, this is the end of this specific selection from this one book. If we have more time, we can discuss more things, go into other issues. We will stop here. Bi'idhnillah azza wa jalla. I just want to ask a few basic questions. And that is, with regards to the hadith of Ali ibn Talib, or the hadith of Amr ibn Shaykh and Abid's different narrations, with regards to commanding your children to pray at the age of 7, and physically disciplining them at the age of 10. There are many, many, many people who have a poor understanding of this hadith. You have some people say you can't beat your child unless they're 10 years old. Because if you beat them for prayer and nothing else, then so on and so forth. You have others who say the prayer is obligatory upon a child at 7. Others who say the prayer is obligatory upon a child at 10. And so on and so on and so forth. So what is the proper, correct understanding of this hadith? How do we understand this hadith? The Prophet ﷺ tells us, order your children to pray at the age of 7. Physically discipline them when they don't pray at the age of 10. And split them up in the bed. What does this hadith mean? Anybody else before Najm? It's not. Why not? The hadith says, command them to pray. I didn't say you're right or wrong, but I'm shooting it back at you. You gotta shoot it back.
The They haven't reached the age of maturity.
طيب. هكذا. Say it. That's what I want. He says that they haven't reached the age of La, not tamyiz. No. It says bulugh, puberty, adolescence. In other words, in Islam, there is a general principle that nothing is obligatory upon a person until what? No, say tamyiz. No. La, no. Tamyiz is 7 years old, 6 years old.
Adolescent age, the standard.
There you are. Puberty. It's a difference. But let's say this is specific. That's general. Possibly. Everybody understand the point here in the lesson? If I say something back to you, doesn't mean that you're wrong. Doesn't mean that you're wrong. But I want you to understand correctly. Play it. He says that you don't have to pray unless you're of age. So what does the hadith mean then? Fadl mean.
When he said order, he didn't say order them to make all 5. So order just means order them.
So it's obligatory to make some prayers, 2, 1, 3, and then out of age. Follow Najm. Recommended, possibly. Nah, Jay. Could be recommended. Good. Some commandments in the Sharia doesn't necessarily mean that it's wajib. It could mean that it's what? Recommended. We said that the rule of thumb is that whenever there's a commanding verb, the act is what? Obligatory until? Thank you. That the act is wajib until?
It's not.
Proven recommended. I said say the act is obligatory until proven recommended. The Prophet says, pray in your shoes. It is obligatory to pray in your shoes until you can prove and establish why it's only recommended. We explained this Allah knows how many times? Taught how many times, Shaheed? Several times we explained this principle. Allah knows. Bilal, how many times? Allah knows best, huh? Allah Akbar, subhanAllah. Everybody's going against me. We never explained this before? Stop.
Right there.
We explained it several times. That is a command. That thing is obligatory until it's proven to be recommended. The hadith says, tell them to pray. Obligatory. Then we have another proof stating that they're not of age yet. So it goes back to being recommended. That's one, or it could be something else. Anybody else?
Is it to get them started, a training?
Get them started, training. Possibly. It's good. But we have to go back to the hadith itself. The hadith is an address to the child or the guardian of the child.
The guardian of the child.
Ahsant. This hadith is not speaking to children. So the hadith has nothing to do with the prayer being obligatory upon the child. The hadith is an obligation upon the wali. Subhanallah. The hadith is what? It's an obligation upon the what? The guardian. As Imam al-Shawkani rahimahullah mentioned. Most of the scholars say that the prayer at this age is recommended because the child is not of age. Al-Shawkani said that's the hadith is not even talking about that. Hadith says, Murru abna'akum. Command your children. Children don't have children. Parents have children. So therefore the hadith is addressing the what? Guardian. So therefore if the child is by himself, the child is 7 or 8 or 9, do they have to pray? No, they don't. But the moment the father says, get up for Fajr, what do you have to do? He has to listen. Because obedience of the parents is wajib. Everybody understand the difference? This is a very important issue in Islam. Very important. You tell your wife to do something that's supererogatory, something extra. She doesn't have to pray like this. She doesn't have to cover like this, but you tell her to. It becomes what upon her? Mandatory. Mandatory. And there's no, it's only recommended. I have a different opinion. If the husband says do this, then she has to. What does she have to do? She has to obey, as long as it's not haram. As long as he doesn't tell her to do something that's haram, she must listen. The child, your father says, Zakaria, do this, do that, give me some money from work. You have to listen to him. As long as it isn't haram, you must listen to your father or your mother. What happened to that? So therefore the hadith, that's the first point, is an address to the parents and the guardians. Number 2. We'll suffice ourselves with that. We don't go on too long. Perhaps next week. Allah knows best. If there's any questions or anything, we'll try to take some now. And if not, alhamdulillah, rabbil alameen. Follow Najm.
Just to go back to the hadith where the woman has right over the child, what is the wisdom in saying that or what are some of the benefits in saying that if she remarries? I mean, what is the meaning behind that? Is it because maybe she might be busy, that's why she would lose her right, or she'll be because she'll be busy with her new husband? What you understand?
The question says, what are some of the wisdoms that some of the people of knowledge mention with regards to why the child goes back to the father when the woman remarries? There lies no doubt from the things that you mentioned, from the wisdoms. Okay? Whereas a woman being more preoccupied with her husband, or not even that, just the whole concept of children, and the whole concept of the father has rights to his child. Okay? Not looking after the child properly, the child being raised and nurtured by another man. Okay? Unnecessarily. These are all wisdoms. It's my child. I want to raise my child. You're married, you have a foreign man, it's different. With regards to your responsibility as a wife, with regards to my child being raised in the house of this man. These are some of the things that can become apparent to us. At the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, but these are clear reasons. While the woman has more rights to the child, as long as she doesn't remarry. Especially if the child is a girl. Nothing. It's a girl child. Okay? That man may not want that girl being raised by another man. It's his responsibility to teach that girl etiquettes. Or a boy. Okay? With regards to disciplining the child, there lies no doubt. Stepfather, okay, stepmother, no matter how loving and how caring, in most cases, not all the time, but in most cases, it's not going to be the same as the original parent. And that goes on both sides. Okay? And there are different exceptions to the rule, but in most cases, the stepchild is not going to have the same bond with the stepfather. It's always going to be that barrier. And the moment you get into a fight or argument, they're going to say, "You ain't my father." Right or wrong? In most cases, this is what happened. You're not my dad. You're not my real dad. This is natural. Not all the time. Not all the time. Because it can be some parents that are abusive or strung out on drugs, whatever the case may be, and the stepfather or the uncle or the neighborhood person may raise them better. But we're talking about in most cases. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Next question says, Assalamu alaikum wa alaikum salam. Is it haram to raise your voice at children? A sister claimed that the Prophet never raised his voice at children. Fire. It says, I recently prayed in the masjid and two girls, 9 years old, prayed directly to my left. All throughout the prayer, they hit each other, bumping together throughout such that I was moved with each movement of theirs. I gave both of them a tongue lashing while their mothers were present. Their parents agreed that they were wrong and that their behavior was unacceptable. However, another sister felt that I was sinful. Can you offer any advice related to this issue? In that masjid, the children are out of control. This has been a status for years. And may I call you to ask you about a family matter I'm facing? May I have your phone number? Barakallahu feek. We say that as for the impermissibility of raising your voice at a child, the impermissibility is something I've never heard any scholar of Islam mentioning. Never. Allah knows best. What's the proof that it's haram? The Prophet ﷺ raised his voice to his own companions. They were grown men. As Jabir radiallahu anhu mentioned, the hadith is correct in Sahih Muslim, that when it was the Friday prayer, the Prophet ﷺ would praise Allah, he would laud Allah. He says what? وَعَلَى صَوْتُهُ وَاشْتَدَّ غَضُبُهُ كَأَنَّهُ مُنذِرُ جَيْشٍ أو كما قال. He says that when the Prophet ﷺ, after praise and laud Allah, he would raise his voice. The highlighting point, he would what? Raise his voice. And he would become very angry, as if he was warning the people against an invasion, against an attack. So therefore, if the Prophet ﷺ raised his voice at grown men that were knowledgeable, that were learned, that were pious, that had families and people under them, what do you think is the case with regards to a small child? Sah? Right or wrong? Right or wrong? If you say wrong, say it. No. It's common sense. Not check. If there's a need, like you say, no, follow. Let us follow.
They're just viewing it because, I mean, a grown man might be able to cope and deal with things that they know the Prophet ﷺ is telling him. They're going to take more heat to than a child. Like the time when he sent out Anas to get something. And I think he forgot because he was playing. So he didn't really scold him or something.
Right.
You know? So is that...
The Prophet ﷺ, he raised his voice as commands for what purpose? What was the reason why he raised his voice? No, nothing. Nice sweater too, mashallah. May Allah allow you to wear it out. I mean, Tayyip, why do we raise voices as companions?
Sometimes with emphasis.
Place emphasis. So, raising your voice at a child, is it recommended? That's one issue. Is it best? That's one issue. We're talking about, is it haram? That's first and foremost. Okay, that's first. Secondly, it's a clear reason why he raised his voice. The Prophet did not raise his voice all the time to his companions, but sometimes he did. Sometimes he what? He did. So if he had a need to raise his voice at a grown man, I don't think there should be any difference intellectually that there is occasional need to raise your voice at a child. Whether it's disciplining the child, whether it is warning the child from something harmful, especially if the child is 9 years old. It's not like a little small baby. They understand what's going on. They know when it's time to pray, they start talking. My 5-year-old daughter is not the same as my 7-year-old daughter. Evidently. Night and day.
So you have to go on to the basic then.
Huh?
You have to go on to the basic. There's some proof and evidence.
To say that it's haram, I've never heard or say anything. It may not be best. And the Prophet, just because he never raised his voice at his children, the Prophet had the best akhlaq ever. Just because he did that doesn't mean that it's haram to do the opposite. It's recommended to do what he did. Okay? The Prophet never became angry unless it was Allah's rights that were being violated. Can any of us, start on myself, can any of us say that? It's difficult. At the end of the day, we say that hikmah. If you can address the child without raising your voice, alhamdulillah. If you can discipline the child without beating them, without raising your voice, alhamdulillah. But there lies no doubt sometimes there's necessity to raise your voice. Sometimes there's a necessity for physical discipline, no matter what modern day psychologists and people say. No, really. They can say this and they can say that. Please sit down. And just no. People lived for generations, raised some of the best, most influential men and women in history, and there was discipline. Now, extremism, abuse, so on and so forth, that's one thing. Even though those terms are relative terms. If I do this to my daughter, sit down. I told you 3 times, nicely to sit down, and I'll pop my daughter. They may call that abuse. That's extreme. That's ghulu. Now, if I boom, that's one thing. And there's a difference between Zayd being 12 years old and a baby being 5 years old. He's going through puberty, emotions, he gets smart, sucks his teeth. He may need, from time to time, an occasional body shot, as we say. For his own purpose, his own benefit. Last shot. The Prophet never did this, he never did that, but that does not mean that it's haram. At the end of the day, sister, I think that you should have spoken to those children. Tell them the best way, address their parents, give their parents advice. At the end of the day, if you see some evil in the masjid and you have the ability to stop it without causing a greater harm, then you should do so. If it is a necessity or a need to raise your voice, then it is what it is. As for if you have a personal issue, we can try to make some time or arrangement to see what we can do with your personal issue or advice. Inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Bismillah. If you have a personal issue, something that you need to ask about in private or something that is an intimate, private issue, hopefully we can arrange some time one way or another, inshallah. Subhanahu wa ta'ala. Via one of the children or inshallah. Okay? Bismillah. Fadla Abu Amin.
Just once a child chooses a parent, is that choice permanent?
Stop.
Does that mean like from the point that they choose it up until they're like whatever, 18, 19?
Right. The question says, if that child makes a decision, is the choice permanent? We say that it will be permanent unless it's a reason not to be permanent. Okay? If the mother or the father later on starts doing some really bad things or some really terrible things happen, then that's one thing. And that is the judge. That is the job of the judge, the qadi. In America, there are no judges. And the closest person you can get to a judge is an imam of a masjid. The closest thing you're going to get to a judge, an Islamic judge. So therefore, the child's been living with the mother for 3 years. However, the mother, she left Islam, blah, blah, blah. Then we say we need to reinvestigate this. We need to look into this issue again. But it goes back to theory and practice. Because here, the rules of custody go back to the kuffar taghut courts. Whether you like it or not. Okay? Some unfortunate misfortune of being in the countries in which there is no sharia of law. But it's not necessarily permanent on that. But that's the asl. Now if something happens later on that would change that, that's one thing. But the asl is that he chose this parent, that's what they're with. until they reach the age of puberty adolescence. Allah knows best. Sheikh Mahdi, you had a question?
Yeah, basically, I was just saying about the other comment about the father or did the prophet raise his voice. A lot of times, as a male figure, when you speak with authority,
You don't have to scream.
you don't have, I mean, you could even if you raise your voice, it carries more,
Yes.
more authority. If a child, a mother said with her voice, if she said, "Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this," kid don't be playing, they run around doing it. But the father say, "Don't do this," he hears it in his voice. Sometimes he speak a little louder so this kid can understand and respect authority.
Yes, no doubt, Sheikh. And it's a very important point also is that, children, no doubt, they have their own personalities, they have their own emotions, so on and so forth. But in most cases, a child will only do what it is allowed to do. Okay, you let your child run around and do this, that's what they want to do. You get serious, you get for real, sit down, rumble up. Sit down. So, but if you just keep talking, keep giving a lesson, they're going to keep running around. Children, they know something is serious, they take advantage. Children are some of the most smartest people, in my opinion. Children are very intelligent. They're smart. They see things. They know. They peep. What's going on? Whether you realize it or not, they know psychology. They know how to ask you, Abby, can you please buy me this? They know when to ask you. Sometimes children are smarter than parents. A lot of times children are more honest. As a wise man once said, 3 people who never lie. 3 people who never lie. So the first of them is a child. A child never lies. Children always speak the truth. Not talking about when they intentionally lie, but when you ask them, what happened with mommy? Oh, mommy took me here. Abby took me there. So Abby woke us up and gave us food last night. What happened to that? Umi said, go to sleep. Second person, the wise man who doesn't lie, is a man who speaks at the first time of his anger. At the first period when he becomes angry, in most cases he speaks the truth. Later on he can apologize. I didn't mean it. I'm sorry. But in most cases he was telling them what, Bilal? In most cases. Okay? People may make a racial statement. Or this and this and that. These people. Patience. This guy and these brothers are always like this. No, really. I think stuff like, hey, I'm sorry, man. I was angry. I was under pressure. In most cases, not all the time. In most cases, that's what he really feels about guiding people, or black people, or whatever. In most cases, truth comes out at the time of anger. And the third man that they say never lies is the drunkard. No doubt. People are drunk. They do not lie. They let the cat out the bag. Allah knows best. Any other questions? We'll stop here. Abu Talib.
And any of the scholars' opinion was that the second abrogated the first narration?
The second?
Did the second, yeah.
Fine.
Yeah.
Question says, did the second narration abrogate the first narration? We say in brief that the term abrogation is a relative term. And its usage and its meaning according to the earlier generations is not the same according to the later generations. As for the pious predecessors, like Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah mentioned, the term nasakh is different than what the later scholars used it as. Abrogation meant one being specific, other being general. One being explicit, one being inexplicit. So according to that terminology, yes, but the opposite though. Not the opposite way. That the first one, or the second one, abrogated the earlier one, not the opposite. And other scholars, they say that the term nasakh is the removal of a ruling. It was once previously permissible or impermissible, and then it's totally impermissible, like this. At the end of the day, there lies no doubt. Some said that it was general, and others said it was specific. Yes.
Because the other thing also too is Abdullah bin Umar was early companion, whereas
That Abdullah bin Amr. Aywa. Big difference. Secondly, not even that, but some of the earlier companions narrated from the older companions.
no, an issue when it's.
Now I understand. Yes, that's what I'm saying. That just because of if it was Abdullah bin Umar or Aisha or Anas or Abu Hurairah, who only spent 4 years with the Prophet ﷺ, that doesn't mean that the hadith isn't older than his Islam. For example, there may be a hadith narrated by Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, who accepted Islam early on in Mecca. And the hadith narrated by Abu Hurairah, who accepted Islam later on, the 7th year of the Hijrah. The 7th year. Okay? Abu Hurairah spent 4 years. Ali ibn Abi Talib spent all that time with the Prophet ﷺ. When we say Abu Hurairah's hadith abrogated the hadith of Ali, we say not necessarily, because Abu Hurairah could narrate a hadith that he heard from Abu Bakr. You got it?
No, but it, okay.
That concept. You know what I'm saying? You got that concept? Just because he's a younger companion doesn't mean his hadith is new. You with me, Sheikh? Follow. Go ahead.
He heard himself.
Okay.
He heard from.
La, we didn't say that. He said a woman came to the Prophet ﷺ. Was he there? Doesn't necessarily state that.
So he didn't give you any.
It doesn't necessarily say that. Not here. And the companions, they narrate from each other. Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, who narrated over 1,000 hadith from the Prophet ﷺ. When the Prophet died, Ibn Abbas was a very, very young man, barely at the age of puberty. He only heard a handful of hadith directly from the Prophet ﷺ. Only a handful. He narrated all those other hadith from other companions. So it doesn't necessarily state that he saw the woman come to her. A woman came. And Allah knows best. Clear, Shaykh? Alhamdulillah. Allah knows best. We'll stop here. We ask Allah for beneficial knowledge and righteous action. Ameen. And to forgive us of our sins and have mercy on our poor souls. Ameen. We ask Allah to make us better and allow us to implement and act upon that which we have read and mentioned, and not to make it a proof and argument against us. Ameen. Jazakumullahu khairan.
Barakallahu fi Sheikh. Inshallah, Mufti is going to be next Saturday and the following Saturday.